Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Karl Sakas. When I first joined the agency world, Karl had the first books that I read in order to understand what I was getting myself into. So I was very excited to get him on the show to talk about the future of agencies and how he sees things changing. Karl has a wealth of knowledge in all things agency, and I mean, he's got some great insights packed into this episode for you. In this episode, we discuss agency structures that are gaining in popularity, how to build a strong support network to help you grow and succeed, how to delegate tasks and automate processes to free up time for more impactful work, and more. Today's episode is brought to you by ZenPilot. There are a lot of tools out there for agencies to manage projects, but any project issues aren't usually caused by the tool. They're from your own processes. ZenPilot helps agencies implement their project management tools while streamlining operations, so your team can move from chaos to clarity. You can see for yourself at zenpilot.com. Want to level up your agency? Well, we have the email course for you. Explore some of the 5 biggest mistakes that agency founders make trying to create a profitable and efficient business. We're talking about the mistakes that lead to no one wanting what you offer, recreating mediocre assets, becoming completely replaceable. So yeah, it's worth reading. 5 emails, 5 mistakes, 5 strategies to fix them all. You can get it at dynamicagencycourse.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Karl Sakas. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. What's your, overall outlook on the future of agencies?
It's mixed. Agencies will be around forever. I mean, they've been around for over 100 years in various forms, but of course they keep evolving, right? Initially it was all about, newspaper advertising and PR and things like that. And then of course things have evolved. Now, of course, there's the idea of a digital agency versus other, but every agency is digital. Of course, what will that be called in the future? I don't know. I mean, we'll figure it out. But the mixed piece there is that, the current challenges, if we're looking at today, the current challenging market for a lot of agencies is making agencies figure out what to do. And, some agencies are going to struggle and I mean, are struggling right now. Not all will make it. I think the ones that emerge will sort out how to navigate those uncertain times, finding ways to be flexible or more flexible so that they're ready for the future. From a trend perspective, whatever happens in marketing and design and technology, you still need to get the fundamentals of running your agency right. Building your cash reserves, focusing on running a profitable business, building a team of the right people, including having the right team structure as you grow. What worked a few years ago probably isn't working today, definitely won't work a few years from now. So, with all of the trends, it's important to be aware of what's going on, but you still need to run profitably in the meantime.
Right. Yeah, I think the curse of the Red Queen is ever present, right? What worked yesterday will not work tomorrow. And I think it's going to be painful for some people who don't kind of realize that right now. But I wanted to get into really, what all of your conversations are kind of around right now, which is working less and earning more.
Yes.
I think in past generations, right, there was this pride that came with working more. So it was like, no, I'm doing my job. I'm here. I'm showing up. I'm putting in the effort. And now as time goes on, that's kind of fading less. And so I'm wondering, one, is it a generational thing, right, where it's just, the next generation has different priorities, or is it more that, hey, we have evidence now that that isn't what you have to do in order to be able to earn more. Like you can actually work less and still find this great work-life balance.
Some of it's generational. Some of it also is the age of the individual, and in particular, when I started doing freelance web design in high school back in the days of dial-up, I was also doing computer training and troubleshooting, and many of my clients in that work, as I was a teenager, were 40, 50, as many as 70 years older than I was. And so I was getting a lot of perspective on what the future might be like 50, 60, 70 years in the future. And, one of the things I noticed is that people's priorities had changed. As a teenager and then heading into college, it was all about ambition and growth and this
Mhm.
and that. And, to generalize, as you're getting older, your priorities change. And it's more about building a life that you're happy with, you're satisfied with, and things like that. I mean, also health issues can come up and things like that. So, some of it is generational, I imagine, but there's also a piece around, as people get older in general, they start reflecting on what they want. And if what they have now isn't getting them what they want, they're going to make changes.
Mhm. Right. Once you're, what was the saying? You can't change what you tolerate. And I think, yeah, once an agency owner kind of realizes like, oh, this isn't what I should be doing or how I should be doing it, it opens the door for those changes to actually, you know,
Yes,
actually
for the
happen.
owner and for their employees or
Right.
contractors or team members, if you're running an agency, you're in a unique spot compared to society in general. As a business owner, you have a lot of control over your day-to-day schedule and
Mhm.
where you spend your time, the people you work with, the decisions you make, things like that. Yeah, there's still, ups and downs with specific clients, but I was talking with an agency owner who sold her agency. We had worked together. She followed the advice and a few years later exited. And I'd asked, checking in after that, what was different. And one of the things she mentioned was she has a lot more
Mhm.
meetings as an employee of the agency, as part of staying that did the acquisition. So a lot more meetings, but there's also this weight off her shoulders that she is not in charge of everything and making sure everything happens and all. So, I mean, some people may decide if you're running an agency that you don't want that responsibility, but you do have a ton of flexibility compared to being an employee somewhere else. So really it's about figuring out, what do you want? What do you like
Right.
most? If you like the craft of your work, as an owner, you don't have necessarily a ton of time to do that craft. You can make yourself more optional on day-to-day operations, but you're not going to be in Photoshop all day long
Mhm.
or something like that, if that's what you'd rather do. So really it's about, what do you want? And then, is your agency the best way to accomplish those goals for you and your family?
Right. And how do you, when working with agencies, right? How do you kind of help them figure out where they want to go, like with it?
One of the tools I use is something I call an advanced retrospective, where you write about your ideal future day as if it's already happened. And you
Mhm.
can pick any day you want. I'll usually recommend starting with something 5 years out. You could also look 1 year out, or you could look even further out. But 5 years is a good balance, right? It's not too far away, but it's also not immediate. And the idea is, you put in the day. Today's December 31st, and you pick the year, and it's my ideal day. Here's, because here's what happened. You write about your day.
Mhm.
That gives people an opportunity to visualize what their ideal is, to try to step out of their current situation and think about what could be different, what would be better. Sometimes people do that and they're like, you know what? Actually, I'm not running my agency anymore. Or they're
Mhm.
like, I'm running the agency and actually I'm more energized than ever, but I've made these major changes that I've been putting off, and I realize, okay, I'm going to have to figure that out. Once they know where they want to go, I can help them get there. And I have some other tools, things about looking at where they've been, where they are now, and where they want to go, and things like that. But it all starts with, as Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind.
Mhm.
And you need to take that time to reflect and decide, where do you want to go? And then I can help you get there.
Right. Yeah. Without knowing where you are now and where you want to go, right? Making that bridge is kind of impossible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, really valuable exercise. Let's talk actually like within agencies and in the teams.
Mhm.
Uh, I think article I read from you before was about the six types of roles or the six roles
Mhm.
within an agency, right?
Yes.
I'm probably gonna slaughter them, so help me if I need to. But account manager, project manager, subject matter expert, let's see, support, strategist, and biz dev.
Yep. That is
Boom,
exactly right.
awesome. All right,
Yeah.
and I do read things. Look at that.
Yeah.
Um, how do you foresee any of that changing for like what agencies actually need as we go into the future when technology is now advanced and maybe some of these things can be minimized, reduced, or just irrelevant?
So the nature of each role is likely going to change in different ways, but the need for the role is still going to be true. So, AM is keep the clients happy, sell them more work. PM
Mhm.
is get the work done smoothly, efficiently, profitably. Your subject matter experts, that'll depend on your agency's focus, but that's design, development, copywriting, analysis, things like that. The client strategist role is sort of a super SME. Their job is to take whatever the client's budget is. How do you maximize or optimize their budget? They've got 10,000 a month. What do you do? They have 100,000 a month. What do you do? Things like that. And they tend to be more client facing than some of the other SME roles. Biz dev is
Mhm.
really three things: marketing, sales, and partnerships. Partnerships, I mean, I know you're a fan of partnerships, is
Mhm.
one of often the most neglected areas of agency biz dev.
Yep.
Then, we've got support, which is operations and leadership. Operations keep things running smoothly shorter term. Leadership keep things running smoothly and heading toward your long term direction, over the longer time horizon. So those are going to be true regardless. But for
Mhm.
instance, think about, what you may have outsourced to a staff designer versus what you might outsource to a freelancer versus what, once you have the template set up, you might just do yourself in Canva.
Mhm.
I mean, thinking back to my web designer days 20 plus years ago, I mean, Canva would have been amazing.
Right.
For instance, versus using Photoshop or hand coding everything, things like that. So what a designer does is going to be different. And as an agency owner, one of the things you're thinking about is, okay, well, what is the skill level of what I need? On the other hand, for instance, I hired a book designer in London to create my Work Less, Earn More book cover. And, I guess I could have hired, or could have done some sort of AI cover or could have gone to Fiverr or something like that. But I knew that wouldn't give me the production values I wanted. And so,
Mhm.
that was just a case where, hiring Matt Curtis, who is the designer, gave me, I think, a better experience. Right, he was designing covers for like the New York Times Magazine and things like that, and just he, as he walked me through the creative process, as he was doing, doing the brief, and we're doing concepts and things like that. One of his concepts, which we didn't go with, there's a piece of art that is a banana duct taped to a wall, and so one of the things that he came up with was a mouse duct taped to the wall, and then finally one with a laptop taped to the wall. And apparently his wife walked in and is like, why is there a laptop taped to the wall? Kind of thing. Now, would AI figure that out? I mean, maybe eventually, but
Mhm.
the nature is going to change. You still need the subject matter experts.
Right.
Some of it may be human, some of it may be AI or other technology. But you still need all six roles. They need to
Mhm.
happen. Part of your job as an agency owner is deciding and working with your leadership team, how are you going to staff it? And that also gets into team structure as well.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the critical pieces there is the you will at some point be replaced if all you're doing are tactical deliverables. But
Yeah.
we as humans have this ability to kind of connect dots through synthetic and creative imagination and
Hmm.
pair things up with this and be strategic experts because we see these patterns that no one else is noticing by just being in there and seeing it so many times. So um,
Yes.
I think AI will probably catch up to that at some point. But
Yeah.
for now, that's the moat you need to dig.
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I guess even let's get into team structures and stuff. I
Yeah.
guess because there's a lot of different structures. Pods versus um, just a complete spread. Everybody's working on every client.
Yes.
What are some of the considerations that I guess youth agency owners should be taking into account as we
Right.
look at the future of how the market's shifting?
So in my work, I've worked with at this point over 600 agencies directly on every inhabited continent. Agency structures tend to fit into five different areas. So there's the flat structure that's sort of like everyone is in one big room, whether virtually or not. Just about everyone reports to the owner. Maybe there's one other manager in there. There's the matrix structure, which is sort of like what you would see from, Mad Men. There tend to be account managers who are client facing and maybe PMs, and then there are departments. There's maybe a design or creative department. There's a development department. There might be a PR or social media department. You could do different things like that. But that's the matrix structure where people will tend to have, if they're doing client delivery, they'll have a people manager, maybe the creative director, but they might have a day-to-day manager, maybe a project manager or an account manager who's assigning things. So they have two managers in a sense. There's the pod structure, which you mentioned, which is agencies within an agency. Pods are definitely a rising topic in my work. There are pros and cons to pods. They don't fix everything, and they also introduce some new problems, but definitely worth exploring as a way to scale your agency without some of the typical problems with the older models. There's the on-demand structure where there's a core team of the owner or owners and some employees, but most of the work is done by freelancers, or you could potentially outsource to other agencies, what I would call the front-end agency model, where you're doing the client-facing work, brand building, so on, and then you're outsourcing fulfillment. And then the final structure is sort of a catch-all that I would call the eclectic structure. That's sort of a homegrown solution. You figured something out over the years. It doesn't fit into the other models. And it could be working, but it's not very sustainable because usually with the eclectic model, if one key person leaves, the whole thing falls apart. So those are the general structure ideas.
Yeah. And so I guess you mentioned that pods are becoming more kind of popular in conversation.
Yes.
Which of those do you think more agencies are kind of shifting towards right now in
Pods are
preparation?
the hot structure, and some of it comes down to headcount. Up to when an agency is 10, 12 people, the flat model is fine. And sometimes people try to expand that further. They're running, say, a collective where it's sort of no one's exactly in charge and this and that. That can work. The usual problem with the collective approach, which is more closer to the on-demand agency, is no one's really in charge and clients aren't paying for the overhead of coordinating all of it. And so the coordinator is underpaid for doing that.
Right.
But pods are popular because you're building those agencies within an agency. You'll have a team lead. You might have subject matter experts. That'll depend on what your agency does. You may also have some roles that work across pods. Say, for instance, you do video production, but it's not a constant thing that every client needs all the time. Instead of having a full-time videographer on every pod, you might have a video team that helps out the pods as needed. On the other hand, if you're a video focused agency, then yeah, you'll have full video teams in every pod.
Right.
So it's popular because it's like, well, you want to grow, just add another pod. And it also could be a case where you have a pod that is dedicated eventually to a specific client. And, worst case, if you lose the client, you could try to replace it. But if you can't, you would probably lay off everyone on the pod. I mean, that's how some traditional ad agencies will do. It's like, we just landed the blah, blah, national insurance account and they hire 20 people. And then a few years later, they lose the account and they lay everyone off. So it does create some compartmentalization to give you some flexibility.
Right.
But ideally, you have more than one client per pod, unless it's a huge client.
Yeah. So in some of those cases, it's almost like whoever's leading the pod has a book of business that they're
Yes,
maintaining in order to keep the pod going.
exactly.
Right.
Usually, the pod lead will be an account manager / strategist. I mean, the title might be a range of things,
Right.
but they're the client-facing person, keep the client happy, sell them more, and they're also thinking about the strategy as well. They'll usually have a project manager or project coordinator supporting them, and then some combo of subject matter experts as well.
That makes sense. Okay, so you get to see, the internal workings of tons of agencies,
Yes.
which also means you get to be kind of privy to the conversations they're having for sales and like what they're seeing within the market. What are some of the trends, I
Yeah.
guess, you're seeing in agency purchases or like service purchases that other agencies can probably benefit from?
Well, first, for listeners, if you've noticed what seems like a slowdown, it is not just you. I spoke with a client late last year, so December of 2023, and he was doing his projections, and it looked like revenue was going to be flat for the year, maybe up a few percentage points. And he
Mhm.
was concerned about that because his goals have been higher. And I said, 2023 really has been a terrible year, maybe the worst year for agencies in over a decade, because clients have been cutting back and they're cutting back on agency spend. And so some agencies, although he was expecting to grow a few percentage points, I noted some agencies have done layoffs. He hadn't had any layoffs, and others have potentially closed entirely. In
Mhm.
the end, he ended up growing almost 20% as sort of a surge toward the end of the year. But if last year was flat or down, you're not alone on that. And even if here in 2024 things are slower than you thought, it's not just you, right? It's not necessarily something you're doing wrong. I would say, of course, take a look at what you're doing for BizDev around
Mhm.
marketing, sales, and partnerships. What are the gaps? I'll share more about this in an upcoming workshop on diversify your lead gen, July 2024, in partnership with Gabriel Marguglio, a client who runs Next City Marketing. And we're looking at a range of things people can do. It's not do 100 different marketing techniques. It's better to do 5 really well. And you'll need to decide what for your client base and your agency is going to work right. But a lot of it comes down to focus.
Mhm.
Pete Caputa at Databox has talked about this, about consistency and just keep going rather than jumping around to a million things.
Right. Yeah, actually, I think Pete and I discussed that very topic on our previous episode.
Very
Uh,
good.
but uh, but yeah, I mean, it's also something that like I work with agencies on, where it's let's look at your team's competencies, figure out what you're
Yeah.
really good at, what we can tailor the offers around to make sure you're delivering the highest value result, not just hey, my client needs something, let me see if I can do it. Because you're going to have to bring someone in, right, to
Yeah.
help at some point. It's not actually going to drive a ton of revenue. You're just doing it to keep a client happy, maybe. Like I don't. There's so many problems with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, as you're doing that, can you think of any recent examples where maybe the client was surprised, where like the answer was right in front of them, but they needed your help to find it?
I think for a lot of them, it's so I frame it as like, what could you be the best in the world at? And
Uh,
and just that, okay, if we got this, like, right, let's have it. If you can't say yes that you are the best at this, let's
yeah.
cut it. Like, let's slice that pie and come up with
Yes.
like, what can you be the best at? And we keep kind of refining it. And then it's like, yeah, their eyes open and they're just like, I know this better than anyone else. I'm like, okay, so let's build a team around that and get your
Yeah.
offers tailored around that because no one's going to be able to to deliver the level of value that you could if we can get this right. And yeah, once we do that, it's like, I mean, we're in business, right? Like the leads just start flowing. So the
Yeah.
messaging tightens up. Their deliveries get better, which means they get better testimonials, which means they're getting
Yeah.
more clients through that. Yeah, it's just I think that's the approach to making that piece happen.
I mean, I think that's a reminder that just as agencies are that outside expert helping clients, agencies need the outside expert. We all do. I mean, I've been a coach for over a decade, but I've worked with my own coach for at this
Yeah.
point coming up on 9 years. We all benefit from that outside perspective.
hmm It's a Solomon's paradox, right? Like King Solomon, super wise king. He was like very well respected by everybody else, but he had his own problems that he wasn't able to deal with.
Bit
But
of
if it
a
was someone
personal
else,
life mess. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he could have helped them out perfectly fine. Can't see your own problems often. But
Yeah.
yeah, I have a coach. I have a therapist. I have I've had a fitness coach before because like those
Mhm.
things are only going to help you get better faster by having that outside perspective. And so
Part of my intake process is to ask what each client's support network looks like. And I mentioned, for instance, I work with a therapist, I have a coach,
mhm,
financial planner, CPA, like sort of who's your support network.
right,
And if someone doesn't have a broader support network, I know it's going to be harder to help them get results. Of course, it's
right,
up to them. I did have a client where I was like, I think he'd probably benefit from working with a therapist. And I had mentioned it, but didn't
yeah,
press. And then, like a year later, we worked together for a bit. And then a year later, he reached out and he had recently started seeing a therapist. He was like, well, he included a profanity, but he was like, why were you hiding that from me about how amazing it was to work with a therapist? And I said, I mean, he was joking, but I was like, it didn't sound like you were ready. I mentioned it, but you have
yeah,
to be ready.
right. Yeah, I like looking at it too, where you get say like a NBA all-star, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not the craziest big sports guy, but they do
Hmm.
something right. And that's these players have
Yeah.
their own support network within. Like,
Yeah.
you have a coach, you have someone who's going to massage you after the game and make sure your muscles are good to go for training the next week, or right. Like, you
Hmm.
have your regular coaches, you have doctors that are, and physicians, physical therapists, all these people saying about you have a water boy, right? Like, you have a team around you so that you can operate at the highest level possible. And it's like, why would
And
we
that
not try
applies.
emulating?
And that applies to your personal life too, as an
Right.
agency owner. For instance, a client recently mentioned the challenge around getting, pickup from school, pick up and drop off and so on. I said, a client a few years ago mentioned that before their kids had their licenses, they would pay someone at the time $20 an hour to do the school drop off and the school pickup. It was someone they trusted, right? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because then the owner could focus on doing the $250 an hour or more work. And
Right.
obviously they were seeing their kids other times, and it wasn't like they fully delegated that, or abdicated it. But that was a case of, like, if there are things that you're dealing with at home, like, do you need to clean the house yourself, or can you hire a cleaning service?
Mhm.
Can you hire someone to get your kids to school? Do you need to be cooking every meal yourself, or does it make sense to look at some sort of a service, something else? I mean, that's part of the thing of being an agency owner. You tend to have, if the agency is running smoothly, and if it's not, I guess they should talk to us. But
Mhm.
you have likely more disposable income than someone else in a similar position. Think about the work you do delegating at your agency
Mhm.
that can apply to your personal life as well, at least to a point.
Right. Yeah, I think delegation is definitely a skill that I've seen more agency owners need to spend some time with.
Yeah.
But that's a perfect, right. It's not just within the agency. It's like you can delegate a lot of stuff within your life to make sure that you're actually doing the things you want to be doing and that you can deliver the most value with. Um,
Yes. Although, one caveat, I believe that part of being a strong agency leader is having a strong number two, and usually having some sort of executive assistant or other
mhm.
administrative support. If you're married, I do recommend you talk to your spouse directly rather than having your EA handle the communication.
Right. Yeah, that's, I think, probably preferred.
Yeah.
So we talked AI a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
I guess, what are you seeing technologically within agencies that's going to start changing the game?
Certainly, there are dedicated tools in design and development, and otherwise they're more generalist tools. I've started doing like a head-to-head race between ChatGPT, the latest paid version, and Google Gemini, to see, okay, I'll give them the same prompt, who answers faster. Right now, Gemini is much faster and also has a less clunky interface. And then who has the better answer? Right now, they both have good answers, kind of in their own ways. Also using it for image generation for blog posts, things like that. That's helpful. Now, there is a question around: could you replace a coach with AI? Well, parts of it, yes,
Mhm.
but there are some pieces around getting the data in to the system. For instance, in a research study I did with DataBox around what are top performing agencies doing differently. In addition to the initial questions for the survey, we're also setting up a benchmark group so people can see on the fly various stats. One of the things is that the way that QuickBooks versus Xero share info about profit margins, they do it in an incompatible way. So you would have to manually calculate or build in some sort of
Mhm.
middleware to translate the QuickBooks version of profit margins to the Xero version of profit margins.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think there's probably a business need. I don't know if it's a business opportunity, if will people pay for it, but around that translation kind
Right.
of thing. But if you're expecting someone to magically advise, but they don't have important, relevant data, it's going to be hard to make a recommendation, or it's going to be a recommendation that sounds really authoritative, but it's not informed by, I call it clients' values, goals, and resources, VGR. my advice is unique to their values, how they want to operate, their goals, where they want to go, and the resources, time, people, money, software, and so on. It's dangerous to follow confidently delivered advice that is not based on your specific situation.
Right. Actually, the best example of how that played out in my life, I had hurt my calf before just working out.
Yeah.
And I called I don't know what it's, my sister-in-law's husband, who's a
Okay.
physical therapist. We talked through it and he's like,
Ah,
okay, stretch it out, ice it. Like, you should be good to go.
okay.
It got worse. And so my gym happened to be at
Oh,
a physical therapist's office. And so I just walked in. I'm like, hey, do you guys mind just
yeah.
looking at this real quick? They're like, you've
Yeah.
torn the muscle. And
Oh,
so
no.
stretching it was actually the wrong advice. And so it's
Oh,
not bad advice. It's just he didn't have all the
yeah.
context of being able to see it. And so it's like, oh, that's why context is so important. Let's make sure we have
Yeah.
that, right? Um,
Yes.
but I wanted to go back to one of the things
Mhm.
you said for like, can AI replace coaching? And
Yes.
so there was a tool. I mean, it's still out now. Wave.ai. It was
Mhm.
very interesting. It's like $20 a month, and you can get coaching. You tell it what you want to get coached on, and it'll work through. It'll help you create a plan. It'll do it. But
Yeah.
I wasn't using it, even though I was paying for it, because I
Mm.
realized there's something with the accountability that another human brings
Yes.
that, like,
Yep.
I need that. I need to know that I'm letting someone down if I don't hit this goal, because the robot
Yep.
doesn't care, right? It's going to chastise me maybe, but like, okay, like, it's like my vacuum cleaner chastising me, right? It doesn't matter. Like, um,
I see that too as a coach and in my own coaching, where I know that I'm meeting with my coach. I want to complete the things we talked
right.
about in the previous session. And I see that with my clients. For instance, a past client a number of years ago had spoken a podcast about the experience of my coaching her. And she said that the moment she misses one of her goals, I'm like, what happened? Where is it? What are what are you going to do?
Mhm.
And I was thinking to myself, I don't track each client's goals that closely, but I was glad she thought I did.
Right. It works. Goes a long way. Just
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
human, I don't know, just the touch that we have. Like, the more we can embrace humanity these days, I think the better off we are. And so that's probably,
While also finding ways to automate or otherwise get
yeah,
AI
no,
assistance
definitely.
to do the things that maybe aren't as meaningful or aren't as
Mhm.
impactful, so that we can either do what is more impactful or not do anything for a bit, kind
Right.
of just being.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing actually there's a roundtable next week hosted by ZenPilot. So the
Mm.
25th, if this won't be out before then. So sorry, everyone, you can go watch the recording.
People can check out the recording, I
Right.
guess.
but
Uh,
the topic's all in just AI and agency operations. And
mhm.
one of the things I'm going to be talking about is kind of the order of automating with AI and stuff, because there
Yes.
should be an order to it, where let's actually take the tasks that are less uh, creative based, less, they require less human thinking, and let's automate those
Right.
first, right? So that we're just removing human
Mm.
error, because it's just like a check in a box type task. And that frees
Yes.
up more time now to be innovative, to be creative, and do those things
Right.
later. And so, yeah, I definitely think that's the approach. How do we bring in technology in a way that facilitates us being able to do the things that only we can do? And so
That makes sense. And ZenPilot has great content. I've
they
been on
do.
their podcast, I believe, 4 times at this
Yep.
point. So, if you're not following them, check out ZenPilot.
Right. There we go. Shout out to Gray and the team. Um, so I guess one of the last questions,
Yeah.
operationally, I
Mhm.
guess, like, the internal workings of agencies right now, are you seeing things that maybe, going back to, right, the curse of the Red Queen, like things that they were doing before that,
Mhm.
hey, you should probably start like making some changes here, because it's not going to like keep you sustained for probably the growth rate you want.
The biggest theme I see, and this applies to for an agency owner working with their clients, their team, any business partners that they have, is around stop letting things fester. This has come up a couple times in my agency leadership intensive, which is a virtual leadership
Mhm.
development program for agency owners and executives. And the idea of, letting things fester. I think when finances become tight, or you're realizing that you have really big growth goals and you need to make some changes to get there, don't let things fester, right? If you've got the employee who maybe is good at the work, but they're a poor culture fit, why are you tolerating that? You've got a client who is toxic, or maybe not to that point, but is a problem otherwise, work to replace them, things like that. And if things aren't going well with your business partner, you need to talk. EOS talks about the same page meeting. If you have a business partner, they are your most important business relationship. You're sort of business married to them. Are you investing enough time and energy to sustain and nurture that relationship? I spoke with an agency owner or two owners. At this point, it was pre-COVID, so it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and the owners worked in person. But the call that we had, like the exploratory sales call, was the first time they had seen each other, even though their offices were next to each other, in like 3 or 4 weeks. Because one was always traveling, the other was doing this and that. I'm thinking, this is not a good sign that you're not investing that time. And of course, if you find that you don't enjoy working with your business partner and things are at the point of it's not a match anymore, you do want to consider maybe it's time to part ways. One of you buys out the other or something like that if the relationship has run its course. So that's the key thing. Whatever you are letting fester, I would strongly encourage you to take action. It'll be somewhat painful now, but it'll be so much better later, and you'll be glad you took action.
Right. I can fully get behind that one. So, Karl, this has been a great conversation. I want to hit you with two more questions. With the first being, what book do you recommend everyone should read?
Well, the biased answer is to read the Work Less, Earn More book. You can learn more about that and get a free chapter and a free workbook and get all the Amazon links worldwide at worklessearnmorebook.com.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I'd recommend the book Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet. He was a U.S. Navy submarine captain who took his sub from worst to first. I use that book as the core curriculum in leading a marketing trade association. As presidents, we had 700 members, 100 volunteers, 15 people on the executive team. By the way, if you're listening and your executive team is 15 people, that is too many people, but so be it. And I had everyone read it, and that was a key thing there. And one of the things he talks about is creating a leader-leader relationship rather than leader-follower, so that your team, rather than saying, what should I do? They pre-process things and they come to you saying, I intend to do such and such, so that you as the manager and all of your managers can say either proceed, or you can ask some clarifying questions, or if there's a significant concern, you can talk through it and do something else. But imagine what life would be like if your team came to you most of the time with, I intend to, and you can either just approve it or ask a few questions, right, and then it's not your problem anymore. So Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet, strongly recommend it.
Yeah, awesome. Last question. Where can people find you?
You can learn more on my website, sakasandcompany.com, SAKAS, word company.com. There are hundreds of articles and other free resources, along with my newsletter that more than one agency owner has called the only email they read every time. So you can get all of that at sakasandcompany.com. Click the free resources and you can get all of that.
Awesome. All right. Hey, thanks for joining. This was great.
Great to be here. Thanks.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.